All right. Well, guys, welcome to this week's training. Michelle, do you want to kick it off?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm teaching, so I thought, oh yeah, that's right. She usually leads when I teach.
Absolutely. We're excited to welcome you guys all to today's training. We alluded to it during an email and a little bit at the top of the call, but we're excited about this month because it's going to be an entire series on stats. So it's going to be around stats and what they mean, why we look at them, why they're important to our organizations, how do we take ownership of them, who do they really belong to? And we're just really excited to just revisit that for people who have experienced that before, as well as just kind of set the reset button for everybody around that so that we can be on the same page as we move forward, as we collectively start looking at stats and start speaking about them a little bit more. So the underlying current of it always being around somebody, those are individuals that we're talking about, but they're important to an organization and help us better guide it. And as leaders, that's really important. So we're going to actually kick it off with just some basic, word clearing, as well as just getting an understanding of the why, the purpose, and things like that. So, Will and I have had a lot of success in utilizing this, not only learning about this and empowering ourselves, but then cascading that message down to our teams and empowering them to take ownership of their area of work. So it's been really beneficial to us, and we're excited to pass that along to you. So, Will.
Yeah. So guys, I was thinking this morning, as I often do in the shower, where I have most of my brilliant ideas, it occurred to me that what Michelle and I are going to be teaching is actually the foundation, the ultimate foundation of what leaders are able to build on, period. So the nomenclature of like statistics and measurements and stuff like that, like you guys are all familiar with that on some degree for sure. And you understand at a core level that it's important and all these things, but what we're gonna be really talking about, like we always really talk about in our weekly leadership calls, is leadership. And so when we talk about leadership in this case, what we're looking at is understanding how success can be created through agreements and measurement. It's because that's what a leader ultimately does. They inspire greatness. They help other people learn and grow. And so where we get confused as an industry, guys, and this is one of my big beefs with our industry, is that we are very confused on numbers and money. And as a result of that, our profession is frozen to a certain degree. And that's why reimbursements keep going down and why you keep working harder for what you do. And so, yeah, like what we're doing today and what we're teaching over the next number of weeks is going to serve you in a number of capacities. If you're working in someone else's company, these are the steps to becoming an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur owns the business. Entrepreneur owns the business as if it was their own, but doesn't have the risk. It's debatable which one is smarter. Actually, I don't even know if it's debatable. I think entrepreneurs. But the whole point is that like, these tools we're going to teach you are going to be transformative for you in your leadership. And so, yeah, like you might be expecting, okay, there's going to be learning about statistics. Let's get right into numbers and all these things, fall asleep. But believe it or not, where do we begin when we start leadership development? When we start talking about measurement of success? Well, we don't begin with something that can be measured objectively. It's something that's more felt, something that drives us. And what we're going to be talking today is the leadership foundation. And then we're going to tie that into statistics. And for all of you, as you go through this journey with us over the next number of weeks, I just want you to pay attention to your own personal leadership journey. Each of you are doing what you're doing for a reason. You're on this call, which puts you at a high percentage of leadership already, because most people, even if they're decent leaders, are too busy to make time to attend a live meeting or listen to a recording. And so the fact that you're here shows us that you're fully committed to your own personal development. And I just want to acknowledge that before we get started and get into it. And so let's get into it. You know what? I always like to shift things as I feel it happening. We did this with Missy a little while ago. I want to talk to Liz for a second. Liz, how are you?
Hi, I'm okay. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Let's talk a little bit as to why you became a physical therapist. Why did you become a PT?
Okay. Well, the simple answer is I actually have a degree in dance. So I have a bachelor's of arts degree in dance. and I wanted to study dance. And when I was deciding to go to college, I said, I want to be a dancer. My parents said, great. And I was like, oh, and what else do I want to do? And at that time, my grandfather had a stroke, and I had seen him gone through rehab. And I also was a candy striper. So if anybody knows what that is, it's a volunteer in a hospital. And I wore red and white stripes. And I ended up being a tech in the PT department when my grandfather did have a stroke. So when my parents said, yeah, you can be a dancer and something else, we looked at dance and education, dance and business, and ultimately I chose dance and physical therapy.
It's amazing. So you were really excited about dance and the creative expression and the physical exertion, and you wanted to do something that connected that to something that you felt would be a profession of a different kind that might have, I don't know, a different barrier of entry, maybe is the way to say it.
Well, yeah, and the fact that dance is based on the foundation of movement, and that's what we do as physical therapists. We get people to move somehow, some way. We get people to move pain-free, effortlessly, form and function. And so it just made sense in my head of I can teach people how to move by being a dance teacher, or I can teach people to move as a physical therapist.
Love it. That is wonderful. So let me ask you this. Tell me about your grandfather. What did he mean to you?
Oh, he was awesome. So my parents are divorced, and so I would actually live part-time with my grandparents. So he was almost like a father to me. Even though he's a grandfather, I spent a majority of my time with him.
Wow. So when he had a stroke, I imagine that was pretty devastating for you guys.
Yeah, he had already had a heart attack, and he had a heart attack actually at one of my dance shows and hit it because I was performing.
Gosh.
And so I had been through a cardiac rehab program with him where, you walk the laps and you have to cough with the pillow and all that stuff. And I was younger then, and then he ended up having a stroke. And so it was like rehab all over again, but my grandfather and I were very playful. So, I used to like button all the buttons to his shirt, so he would be forced to unbutton them to get dressed. And I would, tie his shoelaces, and he knew it was me, so I would do it maybe on the weekends when I was living there, and then during the week he would find these little caveats. So having a stroke, it was scary, but it was also like another chance for him and I just to spend more time together, I guess.
Yeah, I'm so inspired by your story, Liz. I've never talked to anyone without understanding what drove them into the thing that they're doing, without getting that inspiration. But I'm always a little bit surprised and like, yeah, there it is again, like a totally unique, like there's all things we could spend a whole hour, Liz, talking about what that stroke and rehabilitation looked like to you at that age in terms of how that touched your heart and seeing movement open the doors for livelihood to the person that you love in the top percentage of your world, and how that connected you to experiencing a profession and why it drove you into leadership and all the things that we already know about you. And so when we talk about purpose as individuals, as leaders, Liz has a beautiful story, and so did Missy, and so do each of you, as to why you're doing what you're doing. And it's no accident. I mean, there's always these like logistical things that drive us that we think on the top of our mind, like, yeah, I'm doing this because I need to make money, and maybe the industry is going to be solid for a while. Or, if you're Debbie, you're really concerned about the person you're working with, and you want to just take good care of them because you're worried what will happen if you're not around. But like at the same time, like there's these deep, really, like to me, spiritual, but for others, maybe more just like ethereal, that are driving us forward. And that is the essence of leadership. If you could bottle it up, it's these emotions. Leadership is the ability to stand in our authentic self with these emotions, understanding them. And it's a lifelong process. It's not like we get it one day, but the more we get it, the more powerful we become, because we start to connect with people on an emotional level with their purpose and what we want to inspire in them. And the more people we put together, we call it a team. And then the team becomes a company. And then this like entity has its own soul, the business. And it starts for Liz with the love of her grandfather. So what is it for each of you? What is the thing that had you in the seat that you're in? And if any of you feel inspired to share what put you in your seat, or something that any realization that you have, first and foremost, write it down during this time. And I want you to make sure that you share with the group if you feel comfortable, because it is going to make a big difference in your learning to be able to share these insights. So Liz, thank you for sharing that. And that's a beautiful segue into understanding the foundation of leadership. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm on a new computer, so give me just a brief second here. Let's do this first. And the slides I'm going to present today, I created a long time ago. I wanted to, oh, I can't share my screen. How funny, on my new computer. I have to open my privacy here. Give me a second. I think I can do this real fast. Nope, I can't share my screen. So I'm just going to walk through it. So I want you guys to think about.
Can you send it to me and then I can share?
It's okay. It's just pictures.
Okay.
You guys have
Okay.
enough. You guys have enough to deal with all my animations. So for me, I want you to think about your business like the company you work for or own. I want you to think of it as a living, breathing organism, like we were just discussing. When we talk about the emotional drivers of our personal actions, so does an entity. And so a business has a soul, which is very different than how we're taught as physical therapists. If you're in the medical field at all, some of you haven't been medically trained, but for those of you who have been, just really pay attention to the weirdness that is how we're taught about money and business. It's like, oh, you better not be in it for the money. You know, like we're all going to go out, like we're all motivated to go become rich in the first place by going into physical therapy. That's funny. None of us are driven by money because there's little money to be had in physical therapy. I told my wife once when we were going through PT school, I just said, honey, we'll never be wealthy, but I will always be happy because I get to do what I love and serve people. And so the business has the same components that a living, breathing organism has. You know, yeah, let's talk about anatomy of a human being. Like what would you guys say are what are some of the systems? Just throw it out there. What are some of the systems in the human body? Just throw out any system that you can think of.
Nervous system.
The nervous system. What else?
Cardiac.
What?
Cardiac.
Cardiac.
Musculoskeletal.
I guess I could say
Musculoskeletal.
Respiratory.
Respiratory. Very good. Anyone else?
I think I heard someone say skeletal.
Skeletal. All right. So guys, those are all very good systems. And so I think I am going to share this with you, Michelle, just because
Yeah.
these pictures will help illustrate that out. So the human body has these components and they all have these different drivers. There's a metaphor in each of these systems into a business. And we're going to talk about that, but and then we're going to tie that into statistics later. But right now, because think about the statistics we measure on the human body to make sure that it's healthy, right? Like we can measure aspects in cardiac output. We can measure nerve conduction velocity, and right, and variations from normal. These are all very similar components, but it's going to be weird to you how similar it is. And I don't think it's by accident. In my personal opinion, any organization in this universe is tied to each other for a reason, because it's like gravity. It just exists. It's not something that we discover as much as start to just realize is already there. Oh, you've already got it up. Sweet.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into it. Let's go. Can you go to the purpose, the first slide there? Oh, by Will Humphreys, there I am. Okay, so the purpose of the business is the heart of the business. If you can go to that slide, Michelle. It's the why we exist. Liz, in this case, you know, we're thinking about the metaphor, we think of our heart as the thing that provides oxygen. And from a mechanical perspective, it beats. When we get stressed, when we need physical exertion, it beats harder. It produces more, it allows for more blood exchange, oxygen exchange at the cellular level so that the entity can survive or even thrive at a higher level of function. The same is true for our purpose. It's why we exist as individuals. And I really want each of you, if you're on this call and need to be here, to write down why you exist. Right now, why do you exist? It's not, you have different purposes. There's like a physical therapy purpose like Liz was talking to, but like, why are you on this planet?
Can I jump in here really quick,
Always.
Will? Yeah. So with this, and don't, this will take some time. So this sometimes it may come to you quite like that, but to develop this really truly, like authentically, without just kind of giving it just, oh yeah, I think that's why, but really truly introspectively taking a look at yourself and really trying to get to know who you are, what drives you, what motivates you, all of those things may take a few iterations of visiting this. So don't, spend a little time here. And this is something that I've heard recently, and it's like self-awareness is the best and most useful leadership tool you never thought you needed. And it all starts here. Is just like that purpose is that self-awareness. Why? What is the heartbeat of why I'm here? Like in everything that I do, what is the heart that I'm putting into it? So I love that this is the depiction of it, and just a bit of that breath into, the self-awareness that comes in there. And that takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's a living document. I've edited my purpose statement a million times, but that's really at the beginning of leadership. We want to write down what it is that we're about. Me personally is to uplift through service and humor. It's really simple, but there's reasons for that. Like there's stories behind why uplift is the word, service is a word, and humor is the word. Like those concepts of like why we exist. And a company does the same thing. A company tries to create, when it's doing well, it creates a purpose statement. So if your company does not have a purpose statement, no matter what we talk about in this time together for the HBA, that is where we want to begin. When someone comes to me and says, Will, I want to start a business, this is exactly where I start. So what's cool about today, we're talking about leadership. We're talking about how to open your own business. We're talking about how to recreate the current business you're in to be exponentially more powerful. The biggest problem I find with people is that they think this is too emotional and savvy. Let me tell you, in the circles that I run, when I'm talking to owners of billion-dollar companies, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that, my mentor right now is the retired owner and CEO of $1 billion global software. He meets with me every month for free because that's what you do at that stage. And he coaches me on how to live. This is where we start. So do not pass over this because it seems sappy. This is literally the key to everything that we're going to talk about in anything that we do in the HBA. And the more you can understand your personal purpose, the more powerful you will be in influencing others. So the heart, just like when the body gets taxed, it needs to drive more oxygen. So does our business. When our companies that we're working for are going through change, it's like walking up a hill. Whether we're changing an EMR or a new team member comes in, change is inevitable. It's always happening. The heart has to beat at a certain pace to match the stress that the body is going under. And what that means is the more stress we're in, the more we talk about this, the more we share stories about this. In our companies, any company that I own, we talk about this weekly. Every week in my billing company, we have 30 employees now. Someone shares a thought, a 2 to 5 minute thought on the company purpose every single week. And it has saved our culture because of that. So Michelle, can you go to the next slide? So the values, here we go. I think it was Mark who said the musculoskeletal system. So the values are how we make decisions in real time, right? So going back to the heart analogy, just for a quick second, where do we find the meaning? In the past. The values are the present, and the vision is the future. So we're talking about purpose, values, and vision, past, present, future. And now that we're talking about values, we're talking about the things that matter to us that give us structure. These are the words and phrases that give the body of the business form and decide on how it moves. Am I going this way or that way? Am I going to make this higher or that higher? Am I going to take this job or that job? Has to pertain to the values. It's obviously driven by your purpose and the why, but the values of a company are the lines in the sand that you draw of saying this is what we stand for or against. And so again, this is a big mistake that I see with inexperienced leaders. They think of this as kind of a fluffy thing. Well, in companies that matter, especially like take Amazon, for example, they have 11 values in what they do. When they interview a new hire at a certain level, there's a person assigned to that process whose whole job it is to make sure that person matches their values. And they spend multiple interviews with certain levels of hires going, okay, let's see if you represent this particular value. What do values look like? Well, they can be words, better if they're short phrases, should be discussed every week, should be brought up when you hire someone, should be brought up when you correct someone, should be brought up when you fire someone, should be brought up when you promote someone. They are talked about, and talked about. And every decision an owner makes with the leadership team should be filtered through our values. It's literally something that gets brought up again every week at In the Black. And then every single time we make a hire, we ask, do they meet our values? How or how not? And so that's just like the musculoskeletal system. Once the heart drives the oxygen to the muscles and the strength in the bones, then the entity can make decisions and move based on the values. But we're missing one last thing. If you can go to the next slide. The vision. We want to know what we're doing in real time, but we want to know long-term where we're going. It might serve us to act on our purpose and our values today, but there's so many ways to define success as a company and as an individual. And if we don't know where we're going, it's like that whole thing in Alice in Wonderland. Do you remember that scene where she goes up to the Cheshire Cat? And she's got two paths and he's singing his weird song and floating in and out of existence. And he's like, where are you going? She was like, I don't know which path to take. Can you tell me which path to take? And he goes, well, where do you want to go? She goes, I have no idea. He goes, then it doesn't matter which path you take. Same goes for us. What do we want to create? This is the foundational vision as leaders of where we want to be long-term. I'm going really fast. So I just want you guys to keep writing and feeling inspired around your personal or company purpose, what it is, put some language on it. I mean, these are workshops that we spend hours on with people. So I realize this is going to be very high level. Just do your best to write things down, tune me out if you're feeling inspired in a certain direction and just keep writing. But like, why do you exist? What values in real time do you and how do you create values? You identify your heroes and really like describe them, right? So values for me, I go to Theodore Roosevelt. I go to Ronald Reagan. He's a hero of mine. I go to Martin Luther King, who's one of my all-time heroes, my mom. And I describe them. Like, what is it about them that makes them special to me? If you're a company, you look at other companies and you describe companies that you connect with and you describe what's unique and cool about them. But the reason we are attracted to our heroes is because we find, whether we know it or not, there's something in us that relates to them. So if we have a particular hero, it's because that hero, the essence of that hero resides in us. And that's why we're so attracted to that, because it's like this calling forth of what we could be. Vision is a lot more like cognitive. If the purpose is the most emotional of those three, the vision is the most strategic. There is emotion tied to it, but it's way more like, yeah, what do I want to have in 20 years? And that's where we start. We start with our vision by creating a have, which feels weird because it's more materialistic, but that's where you start. It's not always materialistic, by the way. I may want to have a family of healthy and happy children. And then I talk about what I'm going to do to create that, and then who I need to become. But the vision is something where I want all of you to dream big and go big. And I've never worked with a client who thought too big, ever. It's always the opposite. All I need is $200,000 a year, and then I'll be totally happy. Well, there's just so many different ways to create a vision. But remember, for yourself, for your family, and by the way, I wrote a book when I went to Europe with my wife and 4 kids. It's called The Business of Family, where I realized in that trip, all of these principles I'm teaching you about self-leadership and about company leadership are absolutely applicable to a family. A family is another organization, a body of people, a team. And that's the big phrase that I like to say, is that our greatest opportunity at work is to take people and a team of people and turn them into a family. But our greatest gift in life is to take our family at home and turn them into a team. And in our trip in Europe, we're 6 months overseas, we every day. It was like someone shared a thought on our family purpose or values. I'm a very aggressive dad, so like they just bought into it, and over time they got into it. But it's really one of those things that applies to every organization, and it creates structure and health and clarity and focus, and most importantly, upgraded results. So that's it. Purpose, vision, values. Didn't think we were going to start there when we started talking about statistics, right? Well, just real quick, Michelle, let's free it up for any questions or any shares that you guys have real fast. Anything come to mind that you want to share? Any questions that you have on this so far? Any comments that you have? Silence is acceptance.
Yeah.
Guys, throw it into
I was
the
just
chat.
going to jump
Michelle.
in myself here and say something. The reason, and it's obviously very, very intentional, the way that we outline this is because if there is depth of breadth of why and understanding why we do it, then there tends to be a greater adoption of whatever it needs to get that result. And so that's just instilling within our team the purpose to better move towards those statistics. So then it's really laying the foundation that every time we're talking about statistics, we're talking about human beings in our organization and how that impacts. So that's the purpose as to why we start here, and we encourage everyone to start here, because otherwise it seems as a numbers push, or we're always worried about the numbers, or we're always chasing money, when in actuality, that's not why we're doing it, but it's a way that we measure what we do. So.
Yeah, Mark, I feel like you're going to say something.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was really interesting that you said, think of the company as a living, breathing organism, and you think like, even if everything's doing well, but your billing or your front desk is maybe there's nobody there, or you're understaffed, or they're just not doing a good job, it can, just like your body, right? I mean, it can significantly affect your ability to function and move forward. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You really need to have every single part going well to be at your very best. So I thought that was interesting. That was my comment.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So Michelle, let's do this. Let's go show quickly these other slides on the different systems. I think it's kind of fun. I don't want to spend time on this. I want to just reiterate what Michelle said. The reason we always start when we talk about statistics, when we start talking about purpose, vision, values, is because they're two sides of the same coin. And where young leaders screw up is that they start bringing in statistics for the first time, as they should, without tying it to the greater purpose, vision, and values of why the organism of the company exists. So as a leader, when you are working with people, especially physical therapists, and you're talking about like why and how to measure statistics and what you expect from them, we are so erroneously prone to going to like, oh, you're about the numbers. Oh, you're about money. Oh, like all that crap that we do in physical therapy, which is what's killing us in part, is this ignorance around understanding the health of the business is as important as the health of our clients. Period. And that the similarities between these things are like undeniable. So just real quick, leadership, that's the brain. That's where all the high level decision making is. Michelle, go to the next one. Communications, the nervous system, that from the brain to the peripheral up to the central nervous system. That communication information system is essential to the growth. When the leadership makes decisions based on values, if they don't communicate it correctly to the extremities, to the team, then it doesn't move. And no part of the body is more valuable than any other part of the body. Next slide. Billing and collecting is the digestive system. All that you do gets processed and all the nutrients gets extracted, and then your billing company takes care of all the waste. Next system. And if you don't believe me, talk to my partner, Katie. She'll tell you this is a beautiful analogy. Go ahead and go to the next one.
That's right.
Remember, money isn't why we do what we do, but it's what we do it for. It's the energy. That's why it gets so weird when PTs are like, oh, I'm not in it for the money. I'm like, oh, really? You don't want to create energy for the entity to help and serve more people and create its vision? You're not about the money, really? Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, if I could slap every time a therapist says that, I would. Because it's like, listen, I understand that there's a handful of really bad therapy owners out there who are making a killing doing things unethical, but they are so proportionally insignificant to the greater of our industry. That's not what's killing our industry. And young people think it is. Oh, owners are over billing. And it's like, no. Owners are just trying to keep the body healthy, and they're doing it in some ways that unfortunately makes it really hard because they don't get it. but no one I've ever worked with, if I wouldn't work with them, has intentionally done that. Okay, I think we already brought up the heart. Let's go to the next one. I don't need that slide either. Yeah, just keep going. This is a little bit, these slides were from another presentation. We can talk about these more. This is if we're going to get really down into this. So let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk about how this translates over into organization and measurement of success. Like we talked about, metrics aren't why we do what we do. Money isn't why we do what we do. That's personal. And that is global and inspirational and transformative. Apple, does anyone know what Apple's purpose is as a company?
Don't.
It is to make a dink in the universe. To be significant and shift this big picture by 1%. That's why they exist. It's not what they do. Michelle, go back actually that slide with the circles, please. Sorry, Michelle has to experience
That's
how my
okay.
brain operates. Okay, so this came from Simon Sinek. If you're familiar with him, he wrote the book Start with the Why, huge business influencer, thought leader. And what they identified in research is that like what a company does and the motivation behind it is the why, it's the heart. How they do it is where they start to impact other people. But then on the outside is the what. So like Apple, for example, let's start with the what. What do? They make computers, iPads, iWatches. They make watches, computers, and iPads. Tablets, I guess. How do they do it though? Well, they do it on the corner of innovation and art, right? It's science and innovation or something. So it's art and science, something like that. That's where Steve Jobs lives. How they do it is that they create products that are very unique in their feel and very user-friendly. But why they exist is to make a dink in the universe. So when people start thinking about their company purpose statement in that what circle, they usually say good quality care physical therapy is their purpose statement. Your purpose statement has nothing to do with what you're actually doing in terms of its language. It's its unique own language. Like in our case at In the Black, the medical billing company, my partner is incredibly patriotic. No kidding. 4th of July is bigger than Christmas for her family. They all recite the Declaration of Independence like it's next level. And so we decided, since she was an owner of the company, and since in medical billing, what we do is we fight against the oppression of insurance companies, just like the America did in the Revolutionary War, is that we ripped it out. Our purpose statement comes directly out of the Declaration of Independence. We want to help our clients create life, liberty, and happiness. That's what we want to do, help our clients. And who are our clients? Everybody. The team members, the guy that brings in the water. How we do that is very unique. We project people's income. So we have some unique ways that we operate, but what we do is medical billing. You follow? So physical therapy, what do you do? Physical therapy. How do you do it that's unique? And why do you exist? Once we talk to our teams about it from this place, then we can say, let's measure how well we're doing. Let's bring up statistics. But first, we need to understand more on the organization of the body. Let's go now to that organizing board slide, Michelle. The one before it. One before that, yeah. Nope, one after that. What is an organizing board? It's a graphic representation of the structure of an organization showing the relationship of the positions or jobs within it. So when I start any business, and I have a few businesses right now, when I start any business, this is where I was trained to do and what I've done repeatedly. I first create a purpose, vision, and value statement. That's the foundation of the building. Then I create an organizing board. You guys have seen these. We're going to show an example here in a little bit, but that's like creating a roadmap of your current path or like an anatomical diagram, so that when you bring people into the body of your business, they know what part is muscle, what part is nerve, what part is cardiac, what part is respiratory. So let's go now to the next slide. Starting a business without the foundation of purpose, vision, values, or organizing board is like building a house on an uneven surface. It's like there's some support there, but it's really uneven. And business owners can really relate to this because this is why we feel so unsteady in our businesses, is that we don't have that foundation built yet. Or we think that like the purpose, vision, values is too heartfelt and kind of fluffy. Let's go to the next slide. Or the next slide. Okay, so profits and impact. So this is that funnel. I want you to think about building that business as a foundation of a building, purpose, vision, values. Then we create our leadership. Then we create a team. Then we add marketing. Then we add systems and processes, right? So for all of you, you've built variations of this, if it's your business or help somebody else do that on your own. But at the end of the day, this is the order and the structure that we build. Next slide, please. This is an example of an organizing board, very simple. But you know, if you're Frank Gifford, the software engineer, that you report to Bennett Sweet, the director of software development, and not to Ashton Lewis, the VP of strategic planning. Having these little graphical like representations of your company, even if there's 3 people in a company, are essential for the foundational growth and organization of your body of a business. But once you create that, once you have your purpose, vision, and values, once you create your organizing board, the very next step is to create the positions in that company that need to be filled. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is where we get to the last thing before statistics. There are 4 things that every position in a company needs, right? And these 4 things are what define it on the organizing board that is built on the foundation of your purpose and vision and values. Let's go to the first one. You have to have a post name. This is pretty straightforward. I have a new standing desk and it just started moving because I hit a button. Okay. Post name. A post on the organizing board with exact duties and responsibilities to which someone is assigned. It's weird, but I've coached with a number of companies where I'm like, what do you do? Oh, I do this and that. You know, or in small companies, sometimes I keep thinking of Debbie a little bit, like you wear so many hats, it's kind of hard to separate them out because they all flow together at a small company level. That is really hard to distinguish what hat is this position, what post name is that position, like. So, but our world changed at Rise Rehab when we created these 4 things for every position on the org board. Next position, okay. Every position has its own purpose. Purpose, the reason for doing something, or the goal of action, that which one sets before oneself as a thing to get done or attained, the object which one has in view. So once you give yourself a name like physical therapist, if I'm working at a company and I'm a physical therapist, what's my purpose? It's got to parallel the company's greater purpose, but the purpose of a physical therapist needs to be defined. And you'll see why in a little bit, because we're going to talk about how when we talk to team members about their stats, we're always really talking about their purpose and how the stats are measuring the purpose and the next thing, which is the product. We can go to the next one. So every position has to have a defined product. What is it that you produce? See, when we hire people, we most of the time set ourselves up for failure because we're just hiring based off of expectation. A beautiful example of that is physical therapists coming out of school, what their expectation of production looks like versus what an owner's expectation will be in a small privately owned practice. That discrepancy is such a large delta that from day one, there's confusion, frustration, resentment. But when you can define each role from a name, a purpose, and a product, and you can tell that person in the interview, this is what this position that I'm hiring for does and why they do it. And then the next thing, Michelle, if you can go to the next thing, the 4th thing is then you have, and this is where stats comes in, and you can measure success with the key stat. Then there's no confusion. You're no longer leading. Well, first of all, you're not leading. You're managing by expectation versus leading through agreement. Management for expectation, by expectation, leading through agreements. Agreements are written, precise, clear. Both parties think about things that might negatively influence success, and they strategize together on how to collaborate better opportunity for growth. And you can't do that without measuring it. And that's where stats finally come into this equation. A key stat, the primary statistic assigned to each person or position, to account for their production of their post, product, as well as measure of their contribution towards the valuable final product of the division and organization as a whole. In other words, the 1 to 2 numbers that each person in a company are accountable to. Accountable versus responsible, really fast. Man, I'm going through so much. So this is where we get a lot of confusion in the company. First of all, we don't have this organized and agreed to. The second thing is we are confused as owners what responsible looks like versus accountable. If I'm a physical therapist, I am accountable for visits per week and units charged per visit or dollars charged per visit. Those are the 2 statistics that I ultimately, at the end of the day, am fully accountable to my team, to the business, to myself, and my agreement with the company. The win-win agreement. When I'm at certain ranges, I am producing that well or in abundance or not as much. And if I'm doing it right, I'm measuring it in a red, yellow, green format that we'll get into eventually, so that it's absolutely clear when I'm doing a fair agreement or a green win-win agreement. And so when as a physical therapist, though, when I used to have PTs early on, new patients would go down and then their visits would drop. And I'd go, hey, your visits per week dropped. And they'd say, well, yeah, because it's not my job to do marketing. I don't want any of you ever to say that's not my job. It may not be in your job scorecard or description, but we are all equally responsible for everything going right. So for example, as CEO, at the end of the day, if that trash hasn't been taken out, you take out that trash and you hold accountable the person who should be accountable to that function. And there's a whole different series of lectures and discussions that we're going to have on how to have those discussions, because that is the art of business, is how you hold those crucial conversations in a way that produces outcomes and inspiration, right? For now, we don't let the fear of those conversations change the fact that someone's accountable for everything the company needs, and then we're all responsible for it all going right. So my physical therapist, I'd say, you know what, you're right. Total visits, new patients isn't your key stat. You're not accountable, but you're responsible. So here's what I'm going to do as an owner and a leader is I'm going to train you on how to call your past patients to see if they're needing more physical therapy. I had programs created so that later on, Michelle, and I say me, I'm always saying me and Michelle. That's what I mean. So Michelle and I created these programs where when people started running out of visits per week, they knew what to do because we trained them, but I had to go learn it first by coming to meetings like this. So that this is where it all starts, is like in these meetings. But at the end of the day, I created these programs to help them be successful on the back end. So every position needs these 4 things. And if you wear multiple hats, you need to have these 4 things for all the positions in an org board, but it starts with purpose, vision, values. It goes to an organizing board, and then you can create a post name, purpose, product, and key stat for each position. That's how you start separating your many responsibilities. That's how you grow and delegate to others, is starting with the organization of understanding what is. And then lastly, hold people accountable to that.
That's right.
So yeah, I feel really complete. This is a great intro into key statistics. Yeah, Michelle, please jump in.
No, just for those of you who are in this position where you're holding multiple posts or doing lots of different things, I would challenge you to go ahead and do this for each one of those areas of work that you work in. Because oftentimes I'll go into the smaller clinics and I'm the catch-all. I do a little bit of everything. I'm a jack of all trades. But as you start to scale, or as you want to maybe remove some of those duties from yourself, it's important to have these outlined so that you know, in this area of function, this is what you're doing. In this area of function, this is what you're doing. So then you can effectively train the person that's coming up behind you to take on those responsibilities. And without, having those outlined, or maybe even purposely written, it's difficult to offload that one person. And so you end up holding that for a longer bit of time than you're really wanting to.
Love that, Michelle. Guys, we created this next series of trainings. If you're a leader in your company, which you are if you're here, we wanted to create these so that you could have your team listen to these trainings step by step, and we will help them develop the mindset in this room of how they need to show up. Like, we're producing a great company is created by a ton of individual leaders. And most people are really powerful, but they just don't know what they don't know. And that's what the purpose of this next series is that like, if you're a director, have your whole team listen to these series of trainings, because we are going to help them understand the value, importance, and meaning of everything that you do. And really, remember, like a company isn't powerful until it's group accountability and not individual accountability. Meaning if you're a director or an owner, if you're the one like telling everyone what their stats are and holding them accountable, that's hard. That's really hard and not very productive. The real value comes from when each person owns their own win-win relationship as an individual. They report their own numbers every week to their direct report, and then they work with the team as a whole to solve their problems in creating more value. The company needs to be a company that's going to exchange with that value financially, by the way, but there'll be money in the company to do so when they do that. That's the weirdest thing. When we were at Rise Rehab, Michelle and I, our people were expected to see fewer visits per week than most of the people in the Arizona area. And we had higher profit margins than arguably than all of them that had similar payer mixes, because our people were tigers. They knew what their win-win contract was. They have incentive plans. They were culturally aligned first and foremost, and then they were incentivized financially to go as far as they could ethically. There's a point where we have to cut off things in physical therapy, because with Medicare in particular, federal programs, we just can't have it be never ending. But that's the problem we want to have, is people going, well, I wish I could do more, but I just can't help more people. And those people who make more money, who are feeling appreciated, who see a growth for themselves in their company, they feel valued, man. Like they don't leave. And then they become part of this thing that's bigger than any one of them. And that's when it becomes a family. Tying it all back to the beginning. When we implement these technologies into our companies, that's ultimately what creates the space, money, the energy for people to really give the last 5% of who they are to these groups of people that they work with and create a family. And that's when, as a team, you overcome life's challenges together, not just the company challenges. You battle divorces together, cancer together, loss of loved ones together. That's why we're here. That's what we're doing. And that's what gets forgotten when we start talking about statistics. You see? So please share this with everyone on your team. Have them watch every one of these weekly trainings. I want you to know how much I appreciate all of you. I'm feeling really touched and inspired to be with all of you. And I'd like to just open the floor for the last 13 minutes to all questions you may have on any of this, situations, just anything. And if you don't have anything, we can leave early, whatever you want. This is your time.
So all these videos are really, really good. This is not specific to this video, but I'm trying to remember, where do we find all these videos at again? The ones that we've done?
It's in Thinkific. The software is called Thinkific. Do not be afraid to reach out to me or Michelle personally. If you're like, I never logged in, I didn't see a login thing. This happens to a lot of people because you get this email from a company called Thinkific. And even though we announce it, like it's new to you, so it may not even trigger a memory. So just reach out to us via email and say, I'd love to get access to this video, to my videos, and we'll walk you through it if you know, whatever we can do to get you set up. Does anyone else have any issue getting logged in? Okay.
Is it anybody else having trouble getting logged in or have not been able to log in or maybe has issues? Okay.
Okay. Great. Any other questions? Guys, sure appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of your week. As always, it's a pleasure to be with you guys. Many of you are very consistent every week as well. And it's really want to acknowledge those that we see every week. It's really inspiring. So at last bit of business, if any of you have any desire, like, hey, Will, Michelle, I'm having a problem in this area, reach out to us personally. We'd love to build those opportunities for coaching into these meetings to get you individual coaching since you're here live. Like, think about the big stocks that you have, the big opportunities that you have. It's not just me and Michelle. You have a room full of people and experts that could help you. And anything we do in that space won't go, we're going to keep that private. Like, depending on that content, we may even cut that out of the recording if we need to, but that goes into Thinkific. But just let us know, or if there's a topic like, hey, we really need to work on marketing. We want to get our new patients up. We would just like to have some time with that. We'll create space at the end of these calls to do so, or we can just change the topic to that depending on how urgent it is. So please remember, this is your experience, own it. Like, what can you do? This is such an opportunity that you've invested into. Why not get everything out of it, every last drop of value?
Welcome and good morning to everyone, or midday. I know that some of you are joining us at very
Mark found it.
There's me. Mark got logged
found
in.
Thinkific.
Mark got logged in. I was like, what am I playing?
All right, you guys, have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.